Hey everybody, what's going on? Hellmite here, bringing you another video from Grab the Lantern today. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about the Sentinels of Light event, and in particular talk about a couple of things that people are not so happy with, myself included on some of these. Now, I want to make two caveats very clear before I get started on this. First and foremost of which is that I am still very, very, very happy that Riot are doing some degree of lore development and some degree of a lore event, and I don't want to take anything away from that. If the only takeaway you guys have from me doing this video is that I enjoy the fact that there is a story event going on, that's fine. I don't care if you care about anything else I talk about, but I want to make that very clear that I am very enjoying this regardless of the criticisms I have. The second thing I want to talk about here is that I am still a little bit behind in terms of the story, so some of these issues may be exacerbated as I continue to play through the story, and some of these issues may disappear as I play through the story. So essentially what I'm saying is, if my opinion from what I'm going to say here in this video changes over the next couple of weeks as the story continues to unfold, that basically can and should be expected, as I'm still a little bit further behind than other people. They may have valid criticisms that I don't see quite yet because I'm not at that point in the story yet, and I'm doing my best to avoid spoilers. So that essentially are my two caveats for this video. But speaking of being behind in the story, the first major criticisms I've seen leveled at this event is the grindiness, and I have to say I agree. Now, I'm someone who, I'm not going to say I play League, super hardcore. I play maybe 1 or 2 games a night on average. I usually play a few more on the weekend, and I don't grind the game for like 6 hours a day as a streamer might. So for me, and I feel like I play probably more than a lot of players. I have to think most players are maybe logging in, maybe doing once a game like I do, or once a day like I do, but probably a lot less than that actually, probably mostly playing on the weekends, or maybe one every other day or so as they have time to do it, maybe not even being able to play except for the weekends, right? Because people have lives and people have other games that they're doing, and not everyone is super committed to League of Legends, and that's totally fine. However, I am playing a lot more than I would say most of the player base does, and I feel like I am making no progress in the story whatsoever. I took a single weekend off, I came back, and I am incredibly far behind as to where the story currently is. I am not even through the Demacia chapter. There are 2 regions that were unlocked over this last week, and then 2 more just unlocked this week, and I feel like playing through 2 regions in a week is actually impossible unless you are a streamer and you're playing this game for 6 or more hours a day. And so I can only imagine how someone who only has time to play on the weekends feels, right? Like, you have 0 chance of making any meaningful story progression unless you just straight up say, hey honey, I'm not going to do anything this weekend. All I am going to do for 16 hours a day is play League of Legends to try and catch up on the story. And this, I think, is a bit of a problem, and a bit of problem with the pacing, right? The biggest draw of this event, for at least me, and I would guess a lot of players, is the fact that it's canon, right? Everything that's happening in the visual novel as we're reading it is actually occurring in the story, in the universe. Things are changing, characters are meeting each other, this stuff's happening, right? That's super exciting, and of course we want the experience, we want the ability to experience it on our own, right? No one wants to read a random Twitter post that spoils something, or watch a recap video on YouTube, right? Especially given the ability for us to experience it ourselves and to play the role of the rookie. Everyone wants to experience it. The problem is that I feel like a lot of people are going to be left out of being able to experience it, right? Like, either you're not able to play enough, and then you're forced to sort of rely on these external sources to experience the story, which are just not going to be as much fun, or you're feverishly playing game after game after game, even though you've long since stopped having fun actually playing League of Legends because you just don't want to fall behind in terms of the story progression. Now, I don't think necessarily Riot made a poor decision saying you have to play games to get more story content. I do think it makes sense for the event to say you should be playing League of Legends, and for Riot to lean a little bit into FOMO, or fear of missing out, in order to get people to play the game. I think that's fair, and Riot is a business, they do still have to make money, they want people to be playing the game. But I think that the calibration of the event, right, how grindy it is way too off for where it should be, right? I feel like it should be fairly reasonable for players to be able to play through all of the story quests and be able to experience the whole story without having to grind super hard for it. And I don't feel like that's currently where it's at. I really do feel like I would have to do nothing but play League of Legends for probably the next week in order to even remotely have a chance at catching up. So if Riot even made their half as many story pips as there are currently, I feel like that would go a huge way towards allowing players to play the game at their own pace, experience the story at their own pace, and not feel like they're super far behind, as opposed to right now where the story is progressing at breakneck speed and no one has a chance of catching up unless you're doing nothing but mainlining League of Legends for the next month or so. Alternatively, if Riot made the event a little bit longer, if they said this event is going to go 2 or 3 months even, as opposed to the usual one, I feel like that would be a little bit better, because that way you're not as worried about trying to grind out content, right? If the unlocks were coming maybe every patch, as opposed to every week, then okay, I feel like I have a little bit more time, and maybe I can take a week off and then spend a week on grinding. Okay, that's all right, but right now I do feel like the calibration is just totally off right now for unlocking story content, and that feels pretty bad. Talking about the story as well here, I've seen a couple of people talk about how the dialogue in this event sucks. Now, some of this is for the dialogue choices that the rookie gets to make. Now, that is the character that you play as throughout the Sentinels of Light event, but some of it is actually directed at the champions themselves, and how some players actually feel like the champions are kind of assholes to the rookie especially. To cover the rookie here first, a lot of times a lot of the complaints I've been seeing are players either talking about how the rookie is either a, wide-eyed, I know nothing about the world, tell me everything kind of character, or they're a snarky asshole, right? They just kind of make a whole bunch of tongue-in-cheek phrases because they kind of sort of almost don't feel like any of this is real or any of this is happening, and have no respect for any of the characters they're with. And some players are disappointed with the lack of choice in terms of dialogue, and other players are disappointed with those being essentially the only two options they have, or with the snarky choices in general, right? A lot of players felt like they were appropriate in the Spirit Bonds event, which was a sort of canon-adjacent event. It wasn't canon in the sense that everything that happens was necessarily true, but canon-adjacent in that the spirit world probably exists in Runeterra, and that the characters we see there are canon, if maybe in a different form than we're used to seeing. In Spirit Bonds, it makes sense to be a little tongue-in-cheek, because Spirit Bonds is a little tongue-in-cheek. It's not actual canon. Whereas some players feel a little bit weird about the snarky responses that the rookie gets to make in an actual canon story event. To which I would say, those dialogue choices may not be for you. In a similar fashion to how players who are in a D&D campaign, right, you might have the elf wizard who's really trying to be in character and integrate his character with the lore and try to do things the story way, and then you have the guy whose character is a sentient Roomba who is just having a blast playing this completely joke character, right? And in that regard, the League of Legends equivalent is you have people like myself who are super into the lore and want to be playing their role in the canon as best they can, and then you have some people who don't care about the story, right? They're here for the game portion of League of Legends. Shocker, I know. And to them, the most fun they can have with this event is being slightly snarky and sort of laughing at the story events because whatever, right? None of it's real. I may as well have fun with it. In that regard, that's where I kind of feel like the snarky responses come from, is for the player who's not necessarily taking things super seriously, or maybe giving them an opportunity to, be a little mean to a character that they might not actually like in-game, right? Like being able to cuss out Riven because you don't like Riven so much playing against her in the game, so you're going to be a little bit rude to her in a story event. Like, that I think is totally valid, and if you don't like the answer, you don't have to give the answer. In terms of the ability to choose more than just those two profiles, I feel like the character I've been able to play in the Sentinels of Light event so far, at least, hasn't felt like he's had to stick to those two very linear paths. I felt like you do have a decent amount of choice in how your character responds to things, so this is just kind of a personal thing, but I haven't had an issue with that dialogue in particular. The other thing is obviously the characterization of the champions, which some people are being like, wow, Lucian's kind of a dick to the rookie, but I think that says something about Lucian, right? If this is a canon interpretation of the character, then yeah, he probably is stressed out from the world ending and being saddled with this character who's mostly useless. Now, granted, the writers don't give you the ability to be useful because, obviously this is about the champions and not really about the character you're playing, but it sort of makes sense from that kind of perspective, right? In a sense where, you don't want to get too close to your idols because your illusion of them will be shattered. And to a certain extent, I can see that being the kind of case going forward, but either way, I haven't had an issue with how Riot has done the characterization of any of the champions so far. Again, this might change as I play more, and maybe all these dialogue problems I start seeing cropping up, and I make another video talking about it, but suffice it to say, that's kind of where I'm at in that regard. Finally, a lot of people have given some criticism at Riot for the event spoiling the ending of the Ruined King game. Now, if you guys remember, Airship Syndicate was creating the Riot Forge game, Ruined King, which is going to star a motley band of champions who are going to be raiding the Shadow Isles in order to take on the titular Ruined King. Now, this game was delayed at the start of the year, and unfortunately, this was bad for everyone involved. Now, Riot obviously had the game slotted to sort of fill in the story gap in between Viego's release and then the eventual release of this event, and because the game was delayed, there was a gap of like 4 to 5 months where nothing story-wise happened at all, which is kind of disappointing for the player base then, because we were promised a year of story, and then we had a few months where no story happened because we were all expecting Ruined King to be out and us to be playing it and experiencing the story that way. And then finally, Airship Syndicate, the company, is obviously in a bit of a tizzy here because they were expecting this game to come out. They probably are crunching super hard to finish it. I hope they're not crunching, but they may be doing that. And unfortunately, their game is not likely to sell nearly as many copies now that players feel like they, quote-unquote, know the end of Ruined King because, you know, obviously Misfortune, we know, has a ruined skin because of the skin on the PBE, and we know Pike survives, and we know Viego obviously wasn't stopped because he's still doing his whole ruination thing. And so a lot of players feel like the game has been spoiled, and therefore why would I bother buying Ruined King afterwards? Which I think is reaching a little bit, because I personally don't see how Ruined King could have ended exactly. We know some things have to be true, right? No major characters have died in Ruined King. That's fine. That's not a spoiler. I don't think Riot would kill off a major character in a side game that they didn't make themselves, right? That just doesn't make any sense. They would have some kind of fanfare behind it, some kind of story event behind it that would talk about why this character got killed. In regards to Pike becoming a Sentinel and Misfortune becoming ruined, well, that could have happened post-Ruined King, right? I don't see anything about these skins that says necessarily it had to happen during the events of Ruined King. 100% I could have seen the party basically reach Viego, try to fight him, realize they can't fight him, and then retreat back to Bilgewater, and later, when a harrowing hit Bilgewater, for Misfortune to become ruined and Pike to become a Sentinel thereafter, right? Like, there are a couple of different ways that this story could have unfolded, and I feel like a lot of people claiming that Riot are spoiling things are making assumptions that may or may not be true. I will direct everyone back to February, where we all knew the next champion was going to be Isolde, and then it was a completely different character. It wasn't Isolde at all, right? In that regard, everyone made an assumption that we had reason to believe, but we didn't actually know for sure, and then we got Giga punished when it actually came out, and Riot said, no, the new character's a talking doll, right? No one could have seen that coming, but technically speaking, it works. So, in that regard, Riot isn't going to delay this event for a full year or until Ruined King comes out, right? That's not going to happen. They already had this planned. They already had it coordinated over a couple of their own games, right? TFT and Valorant and Legends of Runeterra all had their own Sentinels of Light events that they were preparing, and there was no possible world in which Riot were going to say, no, it's okay. We're not going to do this event now. We'll do it next year when Ruined King comes out, right? So, while it's disappointing for everyone involved, I do feel like Riot made the best decision going forward with the event, and they've been coy enough about the way Ruined King ends that I don't feel like there are really any major spoilers for the game. So, anyways, those are kind of my thoughts on the criticisms that have been leveled at the Sentinels of Light event. Again, I am very, very happy with the Sentinels of Light event and sort of where it's gone and how it's kind of played out, and I'm not disappointed at all in any way, shape, or form how this event has gone, and just that it happened, right? Like, I am so excited that we got a true-to-life story event. That's been super, super cool, and I hope Riot do more of them in the future. The thing I will say, though, is I hope they learn from some of these criticisms and try to do better in the future. So, but those are my thoughts. Again, let me know what you guys think of all of this down in the comment section below, especially if you disagree. I'd love to get a conversation going down in the comments. If you enjoyed the video today, go ahead and leave a like. And if you really enjoyed the video, consider subscribing. I upload a video every Monday, Friday, and on patch days as well. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it. And I'll talk to you all later.